Verstappen secures the 6th Constructors title for Red Bull, McLaren's double podium, and a bad day in the office for Checo. Let's get into the latest in the F1 world from the Japanese Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is back on top as he took his 47th career victory at the Japanese Grand Prix by storming ahead of the field. He finished the race with a 19-second gap to second place after surviving a chaotic first lap, an attack from Piastri and Norris at the start, and the full and virtual safety cars. What the McLarens had feared would happen did happen, and by turn 2, Max was in the lead, making it difficult for anyone else to have a shot at victory. In taking this dominant win and the fastest lap, Max secured Red Bull their 6th World Constructors' Championship and their 2nd on the bounce, after Ferrari scored 20 points and Mercedes ended the day in 5th and 7th. Max said that it has been an unbelievable weekend and that the most important thing was to win the Constructors. He emphasised that he was very proud of everyone working at the track and at the factory, and thanked them for their work in making this an incredible year for the team. Team principal Christian Horner joined Max on the podium and echoed his sentiments in thanking the team and their partners, saying the title is the collection of an incredible effort of everyone doing their best. The RB19, particularly in the hands of Max Verstappen, has been outstanding all weekend, performing perfectly on every tyre compound thrown at it, including the medium which both drivers started on but hadn't been run by Max prior to the race start this weekend. Max's performance this weekend was a combination of car, strategy and of course driver, and it's this winning combination that has allowed them to secure the title with 6 races still remaining. McLaren's amazing weekend continued into the race as both drivers brought home a podium finish, with Lando Norris in 2nd and Oscar Piastri in 3rd. Oscar Piastri earned his first piece of silverware from F1 as he took the podium for the first time in his F1 career, also making him the first rookie on the podium since 2017. In finishing P2 for the 2nd race in a row, Lando Norris has equalled Sergio Perez to share the award for the most second place finishes this season. Lando Norris took to the radio on his cooldown lap to warn Red Bull that they're coming for them and thanked everyone in the factory and trackside for their hard work in making these results possible. Oscar Piastri said he'll remember it for a very long time, and we have no doubt that this will be the first of many podium finishes for Oscar. Despite the celebrations for the whole team and on Max's side of the garage, Sergio Perez had a very difficult day out in Japan, which has no doubt put a damper on his celebratory feelings after helping the team to their title. Sergio had been struggling for pace all weekend, but his race went from bad to worse and has seen him collect 4 penalty points for his super license, giving him a total of 7. He was involved in a tussle for position at the start with Sainz and Hamilton and suffered a damaged front wing and perhaps more, which Checo said just made it a lot harder for them. He pitted for a new front wing under the safety car, but earned his first 5-second penalty for overtaking Fernando Alonso under the safety car. This would only be the first new front wing he would take in the race, as an overly ambitious move on Kevin Magnussen that put the Danish driver into a spin at the hairpin saw Checo sustain more damage to his car and gave him a 5-second time penalty for causing the collision. Red Bull made the decision to retire the car on lap 13, but having not served his penalty, they were left with a problem: face a grid drop at the next race, or bizarrely rejoin the race after 26 laps out to serve his penalty. Red Bull checked the rulebook and chose the latter, and Perez re-entered the track, served his penalty, and then retired for a second time. This situation has raised plenty of questions over whether a driver should be able to re-enter a Grand Prix after retiring already, and has highlighted an issue with the FIA and F1's regulations, but the FIA has stated that they don't plan on rushing to close this loophole in the future. Christian Horner labelled Sergio's race as a shocker, and Perez himself said he'd had a disastrous weekend. What have you made of Checo's recent performances? Let us know in the comments. Heading to the midfield, and we find the 2 Ferraris, Mercedes, Alpines and Fernando Alonso, who all had mixed days. For Ferrari, a 4th place finish for Leclerc and 6th for Sainz was all they could hope for with the pace advantage of McLaren and their apparent pace deficit on the high-speed Suzuka circuit. This left them in a fight with Mercedes throughout the Grand Prix, with Leclerc putting in an aggressive pass on George to secure his 4th place finish. Sainz had a similar story and tried to take 7th position from Hamilton in the closing laps, but ultimately couldn't. Despite this, Sainz said he thinks the team can be happy with their performance, particularly as they outscored Mercedes in what's becoming a close fight for 2nd in the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes faced some fighting between their drivers through the Grand Prix, but avoided too much contact to bring Lewis home in P5 and George in P7. Lewis has highlighted the challenge Mercedes face in closing the gap to Red Bull and says the team need the greatest 6 months of development to do so by 2024. This weekend has especially shown this to the team, as they now seem to have been outdeveloped by McLaren, and Lewis says Mercedes need to look at what they've done and go in that direction. Alpine had a solid weekend and claimed a double points finish with Ocon in 9th and Gasly in 10th. Ocon got caught up in the incidents at the race start, but was able to recover well through strategy and good pit stops from the team, and said he felt they probably maximised what they had. Gasly felt similarly, saying that the team have some things to review to see what they can do better for next time, but is happy with a back-to-back points finish after his 6th place in Singapore. Fernando Alonso was another midfield finisher who, after making up 4 places in the first lap to be running in 6th, eventually ended the day in 8th. Though Aston Martin is sitting 4th in the Constructors ahead of McLaren after a double podium from the team in Papaya and only an 8th place finish in DNF for Aston Martin, this advantage is now down to 49 points. Alonso criticised his strategy over the radio, saying his team had thrown into the lions, and post-race he affirmed this, saying that perhaps stopping too soon at the beginning compromised his final result. Despite this, Fernando said he had fun in the car, and said the team is working flat out in the factory to bring some new parts that he hopes will allow them to stay ahead of McLaren by the end of the season. We had 5 retirements from the Japanese Grand Prix, including both of the Williams drivers, Valtteri Bottas, Lance Stroll and Sergio Perez. Down at Williams, Alex Albon suffered significant damage on the first lap, which forced him to retire after just 1 lap. Logan Sargent's weekend went from bad to worse as he started the race from the pit lane with a 10-second penalty after the team were forced to take effectively a third car ahead of the race. A collision with Valtteri Bottas gave Logan a further penalty, and progressive damage which saw him retire too. It was a similar story for Bottas, whose damage saw his race end early, and Stroll suffered the same outcome due to a rear wing issue. You're all caught up with the latest in the F1 world from the Japanese Grand Prix. What did you make of the race? Let us know in the comments, like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to Apex for the latest in the F1 world.